Dozens of agents sprinted across the blacktop. Weapons drawn, they fired indiscriminately at the building ahead of them. They only had a matter of minutes to stop this mad plan before it was too late. But navigating the airbase was proving to be almost impossible. Banana peels littered the runway, tripping them over at nearly every step. Colorful plants were springing up through the cracks, ensnaring their boots and chomping at their ankles with rudimentary teeth. Somewhere high above them, a mutant reptile was throwing hammers at their head from atop a cloud of white gas. The agents struggled and fought their way to the hangar, but it was too late. The rumbling of engines, the belch of smoke, the crashing sound of a hole being blasted through the roof, they were too late. Out of the smoking hangar rose an airship, painted a sickening red and composed of hunks of scrap metal. The ship was shaped like a top hat. There was a globe on the deck and a sail billowing out of the top. The door to the airship crashed open, and out of it burst a man with a bushy mustache, denim overalls, and a red hat. His eyes burned, lit up with the flame of a man with nothing to lose. He stared down at the agents below him with a carnal fury, watching as they were chomped, crushed, and blown up beneath him. But then his eyes drifted up higher into the sky, toward the prize that he was really after, the one thing that would bring the love of his life back to him, the moon. The airship puffed out a thick cloud of acrid smoke and shot off into the air, rising higher and higher as the crazed Italian growled from its deck.
Let's go! Yahoo! Let's go!
New York City, the city that never sleeps. Or rather, the city where you can never get to sleep. The constant car horns, drunken yells, and general chaos of Manhattan can really get to you, especially if you live in a cheap apartment over a convenience store. Max had been living here for the better part of a year now, and the only way he found to unwind on the busy nights was to sit down in front of the TV and play video games. Sleep was off the table, so that was the next best thing. The pipes under his sink were busted, but he couldn't be bothered to call in a plumber. He had better things to spend his money on. He'd been desperate to buy a Switch for years, but they just hadn't dropped in price in true Nintendo fashion. He was pretty sure if he fast-forwarded to the apocalypse, he still wouldn't be able to find a Switch for anything less than full price. Staying up late checking out eBay auctions, he'd unbelievably actually found one. Some grandma was selling it along with all her grandson's other games. According to the item description, her grandson had been hospitalized after he broke both his hands trying to punch a tree. Apparently, he needed the wood to build some kind of table. Anyway, he'd been banned from playing any games as a punishment since he was getting too obsessed with them. So, lo and behold, a used Nintendo Switch was in Max's hands. He'd been waiting for years to play Super Mario Odyssey. After watching the Mario movie the other day, he couldn't be more in the mood to sit down and play supposedly one of the best games of all time. And play it Max did. Eyes glued to the screen, he sat there on his couch all the way through the night. Mario leaped through the Cap Kingdom with ease, stomped his dinosaur feet through the Cascade Kingdom, conquered the Sand Kingdom while jamming out to the music, and plowed on. After fully exploring each kingdom, he'd hop onto his hat-shaped airship and fly to the next one. All Friday night he played, and didn't even realize when the sun came up on Saturday morning. He loved to see all of his favorite characters on screen. Bowser in his white suit, Cappy in all of his spinning glory, Peach looking radiant as usual, and Sam. Max racked his brains. He was trying to remember if he'd ever come across this guy Sam in a Mario game before. He was just some Koopa, much like any of the others, except he had a white shell. Every world that Mario would visit, Sam would be there somewhere, often hidden under a sphinx or behind a waterfall. It was the same dialogue option each time. Whenever Mario approached Sam, a speech bubble would pop up. I want salt and meats. Bring them to me. Hurry up. But try as he might, Max couldn't find any items resembling salt or meats anywhere in the game. What would they even look like? It all seemed very out of place compared to the moons he was supposed to be collecting. It was only once Max reached New Donk City and met Sam standing shiftily in a back alleyway that the dialogue changed. No salt and meats, huh? Solve the food shortages. Max tried talking to him again, but the game wouldn't let him. No matter what he did, he couldn't interact with Sam anymore. He searched all over New Donk City, looking for anyone who could point him in the direction of some salt or meats, but there was nothing. None of the other characters mentioned anything about food shortages. That was enough of that. Taking his headset off, Max sat back on his couch and rubbed his eyes. How long had he been playing for? Long enough to work up a real appetite. Planting both hands on his knees, Max pushed himself to his feet and wandered over to the fridge. There wasn't much in there. A bowl of leftovers, some cheese, a few options, but nothing like what he was really craving. He pushed his way through the back and his eyes lit up. There, behind everything else, was a little box he'd forgotten to throw out the previous week. Mushrooms. Would they still be good to eat? He didn't care. Taking gone-off mushrooms by the handful, he shoved them into his hungry mouth. That's how he would grow big and strong. With a satisfied smile, he slammed the fridge door closed and stared at himself in the mirror. He must have been gaming for a long time. A thick tuft of hair had appeared on his upper lip. Looking this way and that, Max admired the mustache in the morning light, muttering under his breath, "Mamma mia." SCP-3843 is a little-known bug that appears in physical video games. Much like a biological virus, it is transmitted from one copy of a game to another through close proximity. If one game in a collection exhibits evidence of SCP-3843's presence, it likely means that all other games in the owner's collection also have become infected. But what is SCP-3843? Well, that much is currently unclear. The game's coding appears to undergo no changes when affected, and yet a new non-player character appears when the game is booted up. How this character manifests depends on the video game itself, but there are a number of consistent rules. Firstly, the character always fits within the world of the video game with a small identifying feature. A white-shelled Koopa in Mario, an extra crew member on the Normandy in Mass Effect 2, and even a diamond-shaped block in Tetris with a hole cut out of the middle. Secondly, this NPC is always identified as Sam, or some variation of that name if it is necessary to change it to fit the world. For example, in Elden Ring, SCP-3843 takes on the name Sam of the Starving Plains, or in Pac-Man, it becomes Sammy. One elusive characteristic of these NPC characters is their obsession with salt and meats. In the majority of incarnations, any which allow the character to have dialogue, Sam always expresses a desire to be given salt and meats, with follow-up dialogue usually complaining of food shortages. On occasion, the game will contain additional food items that seem to be generated by SCP-3843. For example, when Sam appears as a merchant in Nier Automata, it will sell you cubes of a nondescript salty meat. If the player chooses to consume those items, nothing appears to happen. Tracking down instances of SCP-3843 has become easier in recent years. The decline of physical game sales with the shift to a more digital ecosystem has meant that transmission between copies has reduced significantly. A physical disc or cartridge is required for transmission after all. What is more, Foundation testing has revealed that this SCP is incapable of infecting online-only games. Multiplayer shooters and MOBAs are totally immune to it. In fact, any game that requires an internet connection to play will be immune to transmission. While gamers do hate the trend of having to be online to play their single-player games, there is a big upside to it from the Foundation's perspective. Who knows? Perhaps there are agents placed in certain publishing studios pulling some strings to help crack down on SCP-3843 transmission. It wouldn't be the first time the Foundation has meddled with the gaming industry to try and control the outbreak. Little-known developer Indigo Games launched in 1980 to relatively small fanfare. They flew under the radar over the 3 years of their existence, closing up shop in 1983. But their effect on the games industry was enormous, as they are believed to have been the source of the original instance of SCP-3843. With the sale of physical games blowing up early in the 80s, it was the prime circumstances for Sam to spread like wildfire. Without much other choice, the Foundation had to step in. Due to a large number of SCP-3843-1 instances becoming public in 1983, the Foundation resorted to emergency containment measures. To achieve this, they caused a crash in the video game market by using their resources to influence major players. This involved financing competing home computer companies, artificially saturating the market using Foundation-owned companies and undercover elements in existing companies, using Foundation elements to encourage poor business practices in existing game publishers, and sabotaging upcoming projects. It was a success. The gaming industry slumped, and sales fell through the floor, buying enough time for the Foundation to get on top of instances of SCP-3843. You must be wondering by now, what's so bad about Sam? Just a harmless NPC popping up in video games asking for salt and meats? Where's the harm in that? You would be right. In the context of the game, no real damage was being done. The issue came from the real-world repercussions of encountering Sam. You see, when someone chooses to interact with Shopkeeper Sam, start Questgiver Sam's storyline, or engage Mini-Boss Sam in combat, it marks the beginning of a physiological change in the player. What this looks like depends on the game. For Zelda Breath of the Wild, it's just a case of the person growing blonde hair, a higher-pitched voice, and developing a sudden affinity for swordsmanship, puzzle solving, and hang gliding. The player undergoes physical change to make them more closely fit into the world of the game that they are playing, while also gaining knowledge and skills akin to what their player character would possess. The first instance of this posing a real-world threat was when Daryl McKenzie, 24, was shot dead whilst infiltrating a US military base after playing an infected copy of Metal Gear Solid. Before his death, he had exhibited high-level espionage and combat proficiency, which his family all claim he had no knowledge of prior to this event. Other cases can be even more severe, such as when the player character is not just a regular human. Infected copies of Cyberpunk 2077 and Deus Ex Mankind Divided resulted in players growing electronic implants in their own bodies, which most often leads to death as their immune system rejects the technology. Instances where the players control non-human creatures are even more severe. One woman sprouted cat ears and thick fur all over her body before suffering multiple organ failure. An agent checking her PC found that she had over 1,000 hours logged as a Khajiit character in Skyrim. Often the Foundation is only a couple of steps behind infected game copies, and so is able to step in and help those affected. This, unfortunately, was not the case with Max. 3 weeks passed, and Max felt like he was on top of the world. He fixed the problem under his sink no problem after finding he suddenly had a wealth of plumbing knowledge somewhere in his brain. He'd gone through his entire wardrobe and thrown out all the awful clothes he used to wear, replacing them with much better outfits. Red caps, denim overalls, big brown shoes. It was the perfect look for him. Every morning, he would sit in front of his mirror and sculpt his mustache to perfection, carefully trimming the hairs to the exact right shape. Exploring New Donk City was his favorite pastime. He'd kick open the door to his apartment and stroll out onto the street, looking for adventures every day. Jumping on the roofs of taxis, playing jump rope in the park with children, exploring the sewers looking for adventures, swinging around the flagpole on the Empire State Building. He was having a fantastic time, despite all the looks he was getting from passersby. But one thing played on his mind the whole time: Peach. She was still under Bowser's control. It wasn't fair of him to have all this fun while the love of his life was a prisoner. He needed to collect enough moons. That's what mattered. But no matter where he looked in New Donk City, he just couldn't find any. The only moon he could see was the one sitting there in the night sky. Staring out of his apartment window, Mario, Max, hatched a plan. His apartment was slowly coming to life around him. Little piranha plants grew out of the pots on his windowsill. He'd bought a gun a few days ago, and already the bullets had grown little faces and arms. He was assembling a small arsenal here, enough to take the moon by force. He heard the pounding footsteps before the door to the hangar flew open. An agent stood there holding a gun in trembling fingers staring into the darkness. Max let a smile slowly creep across his face as his gloved hand hovered over the launch controls. The agent called out into the shadows. "Who's there?"
It's me,
Max cranked the lever forward, and his airship kicked into the sky.
Mario.
Gunfire rang out from all directions as the ship rose into the air. He cackled maniacally on the deck, watching the agents get torn apart by all of his traps. They weren't going to get in the way of him reaching his Princess Peach. Not today. On the ground, agents stared up as the hat ship flew away from them, higher and higher into the sky. Only the faint echo of a
Woohoo!
drifted down to their ears before Max ran out of oxygen and passed out on the deck of his ship. Now check out SCP-049 Fights SCP-343 as the referee. Dr. Bright starts a fight club. and SCP-1471 Mal-O but hacked Minecraft for more.